Okay, to start here we have our section of steel chucked up in the vise. This is 1080 high carbon steel. It's approximately 1 1/8 inch on the width, and we got about 3 1/4 on our length. We're going to go ahead and use an angle grinder with a cutoff wheel to cut that free. It's nice if you can get it in the shape that you want to start. In other words, ideally we would want square. This is octagon, but we're going to heat it up and press it into, or hammer it rather, the shape that we need to begin. So I'm going to go ahead and get set up, angle grinder, whack it off, and then we'll be ready for the next step. Okay, so here's our chunk of steel. Our first task is to get it into the forge fire, get it heated up, and we're gonna flatten it out into the square shape that we want to begin. So that's first step. Okay, so as you can see, we've got it much more of a square shape now. We've also gained some length by forging this out. Now, if I were to start forging this into an axe right now, we'd end up with a blade that's about 2 inches, and I want something that's wider. So what we're going to do next is upset one end of this. In other words, we're going to heat up one end of it, stick it upright, and I'll hammer down on that. That's going to cause this to gain some mass. And hopefully, if we do it right, we'll be able to forge this into an axe with more of a 2 inch, or excuse me, a 2.5 inch approximately on the width of the cutting edge. So that's next. Okay, so I'll repeat that procedure a couple more times. Okay, so we have the piece chucked up in the vise now, and now it's time to establish where the eye is going to be, the opening for the handle. I have my chisel here. This is cut in a triangular fashion and then sharpened. That helps it stay on line. This is what I use to sort of punch / cut through. I like to use that method. That way, making rather these small belt axes, you don't lose a lot of material as opposed to punching where you have a slug that pops out. This does a lot more cutting than it does punching. So in order to lay this out, I'll come in approximately where I want the opening to be. In this case, I'm about a 1/2 inch off the back section, and I'll just make a line across the width, and then eyeballing it, we want to take and cut that in half. Right about there is going to be the point for where we want this chisel to start. In order to locate the mark when it's hot in the forge, we're going to take a center punch and put a nice center punch where we want that to start. Okay, with that done, take a set of calipers, stick it on the back, measure up to the center of that hole, and then we'll repeat that on the other side using that as our spacer so we are in the approximately same location. Stick it back in the forge, and we'll begin to drift the opening for the eye. Okay, so that took about 4 heats to connect the two sides. You saw me spinning it around every other time I would hit it there. That's just to kind of balance it out in case I'm off. Also, I was cooling the chisel off in a bucket of water every time I would heat it because this does get hot. Now that we've connected it with the cutting chisel, I'm going to switch out to this drift, which just is a little bit longer. This is going to allow me to punch through it and do some shaping on the ears. Typically, I will shape the back portion of the axe to within about 60 to 70% of being finished. We don't do it all the way because the eye tends to move around as you're forging it, and we don't want to distort that too bad. So I'll get a good chunk of it done, but not all of it. So next thing we're going to do is heat this up. You'll see a large railroad hammer here that I'm going to set this on to give myself a little clearance in between the bottom of the anvil and the axe in order to be able to punch this through, and then we'll shape this eye up a bit. So that's next. So again, the advantage of doing the split and then drifting it out, this teeny little piece of metal is all the waste that we have. The rest can go into the body of the axe. So good way of doing it. Alright, so we've got the eye of the axe close to where I want it for this stage. We're going to start forging the body of the axe out. I am going to go ahead and take my next size drift, which is this one here, and do a pass through the eye here just to true things up a little bit from the work that we've done thus far. Again, we'll save the final shaping of this for after the body's done, but we'll go ahead and shape this eye just a little bit more and then get on to the shaping the main body of the axe. Okay, as you can see, we have a basic shape starting to develop here. I've been hammering, taking turns on one side, reheating it, forging it the other with the big sledge to draw this out in both length and width. Still got quite a ways to go, but we're getting there. So slow but sure. Alright, so we're getting pretty close on the body of our axe here. This is approximately what I had in mind. We got the width we were hoping for, a little bit of extra length so we can deal with that later. But a little more work on the body of the axe, and then we'll switch back to the eye. We'll finish forging that in, and the basic forging will be done on this one. Alright, so I pretty much have this forged to shape that I'm happy with. I went ahead off camera and removed the back section of the pole, the extra, refined the shape a little bit on the bench grinder. What I'm going to do now is heat it up and put my touch mark on it, and then we'll go ahead and normalize it. After it's air cooled, we'll heat it up to about 1600 degrees and let it air cool. That'll help relieve any stress that's in it. Then we'll be ready to clean it up a little more with some hand work. And then it's on to heat treating. Alright, so we're all forged out now. We've refined the shape a bit on the grinder, and we've got the bevel established. What I'm going to do now is chuck this up in the vise, and we'll clean up this rough grinding with the file finish on it. Get it ready for heat treat. Alright, so we're going to get set up now to do our handle. I'm going to show the extreme nutshell version of this. If you want the full length process, we have other videos on that, but we have a nice piece of hickory here. It's about 3/4 of an inch thick, about 1 3/4 wide. This piece is about 18 inch. I'm going to scale it down to about 15-16 inches. I'm going to put our pattern on here, trace it out, and then we'll set to fitting it to the head. Okay, so we've got the handle profile established. I did an octagon shape on this one, or hexagon rather, faceted edge, whatever you want to call it. About 16 inches. So what I'm going to do now is fit the end to the axe and proceed with installing the handle. Okay, so we have the more or less finished axe here. We got the head all cleaned up and installed on the handle. The handle's just about finished. It's ready for a little stain and varnish. But at this point, I thought we would go outside with it and show it in use a little bit. So that's up next.